It's time once again to sit down and watch this week's episode of Star Trek Lower Decks, and this week, the episode title excites me. Temporal Edicts. I love a time travel story. What? Oh, it's not a time travel story. It's not a time travel story.
Let's do this!
Hi, I'm Phil. Welcome to my channel where I like to talk about all the pop culture that I enjoy, consume, and want to talk about on this here YouTube. Things like Doctor Who, the MCU, other movies, and of course, Star Trek. I'm here for weekly reviews of Star Trek Lower Decks at the moment, so do hit that subscribe button if that's something you are into. And if you wouldn't mind, press that little like button as well, it really helps. As usual, I'll give my general thoughts in a non-spoilery section, and then I will move on and give you fair warning when I'm going to talk spoilers, as I do in all of these Star Trek reviews. Now, I don't think it's a spoiler to say this wasn't a time travel episode. When I saw the title, generally thought it was going to be a time travel episode. I thought, hey, that's quite early to do a time travel episode, but I'm here for it because I love time travel episodes. It wasn't a time travel episode. That's fine, because it was a good episode. It was actually, I would say, my favourite of the three so far. I mean, there's only been three. Not a massive amount to pick your favourite from, but so far, I think this is my favourite episode. I think we got some more good stuff with the characters. The one thing I would say is that we are still 3 episodes in. Every episode has focused primarily on Mariner and Boimler. Boimler. It's focused on those two. And I would like to see a bit more from the other 2 main characters. We got a little bit from Rutherford last week. I haven't got much from Tendi. I think if you watched my last week's review, you'll remember I said I was really hoping that this episode, the next episode, would be a Tendi-focused episode, because we haven't had much from her, really. She is the new character on the ship, which you'd usually, in most shows, make her the point-of-view character for the audience, and therefore we would be seeing a lot of stuff through her eyes in most shows, but we haven't really got much of that so far. So it would be really good to see her have an episode with focused more on her maybe next week, certainly within the next few weeks, because if it just carries on feeling like it's just the Boimler and Mariner show, I think that does the show a bit of a disservice. Not that the episodes and their storylines have been bad, they've enjoyed them a lot. I just would like to see a bit more from the other characters as well. With the focus on those 2 characters, though, we did get some nice stuff from them, particularly from Mariner. We got some nice interaction from her with the second in command of the ship, which I'll talk about more in the spoiler section. I thought that introduced an interesting character dynamic and relationship dynamic that we will hopefully maybe see some more of later on in how they interact with each other. Boimler also had some good stuff and got some nice little bit of character development as well, I think, and showed that he's not always... all of these characters kind of have the stereotype that they are primarily based upon. And I think if the show just stuck rigidly with those, it would be very boring. I think Voyager suffered from this quite a lot, in the sense that a lot of the characters had their characteristic and that was it. Whereas I think we're seeing here that even though they have their sort of core characteristic, they are willing to branch off of them and learn new things and try new ways of doing things and develop as characters. And that's nice to see in this episode as well. There were a lot of very funny lines in this. I was laughing out loud again, a bit more than I was last week. Probably around about the same level as I was laughing out loud in the first episode, so a lot of really good lines, and I don't think too many of them were too reliant on knowing Star Trek lore, knowing the history of the show, because there are a lot of meta jokes in this for us fans as a series, and I like it. I do like the meta jokes, but I think they also need a lot of jokes in there mixed in with the jokes that aren't too meta and don't rely on too much existing knowledge, or at least rely on sort of wider perceptions of Star Trek, even if you don't necessarily follow it particularly rigidly. So there's some stuff about Kirk is mentioned in this episode, and the kind of stereotype of Kirk, and that I think most people will get, even though it's a reference to the history of the show. I think most people will get that. Whereas there is a joke right at the very end of the episode that you're only going to get if you follow the shows. And it's literally the very last thing that's said in the episode. And you'll only get that if you know the history of the shows and know one particular character in particular. So, but that doesn't matter. That wasn't a dud joke because of that. It was just, I think it's the balance of having the mixture of the humour that relies on the knowledge and the humour that doesn't rely on the knowledge, or relies on a more wider cultural perception of Star Trek, that really balances out and works nicely. So yeah, very enjoyable episode, my favourite so far. I am looking forward to hearing more. The only ask I have of the show really at the moment is that they focus a bit more on Rutherford, and particularly Tendi, because we did get a bit from Rutherford last week, so it's less urgent to have more stuff from him. I think we definitely need something really focused on Tendi soon. So with the spoiler section over, let's talk a bit more about what happened in the plot and what I liked and didn't like about it. There's not much, there's barely anything I didn't like about this episode. It was an enjoyable, fun episode. Everything kind of worked and flowed together really nicely. The opening scene we're getting a sort of trend in these opening scenes that they're just little snippets of something happening to our main characters that doesn't at all tie into the rest of the episode. And I quite like that. That works quite well, I think. Here we get one of those stereotypical Star Trek, particularly was prevalent in The Next Generation, a bit in Voyager as well, the classical concert, where everybody would be in 10 forward on the Enterprise watching Data play the violin or something like that. And so we get a little callback to that. We get Boimler playing a musical instrument, very sort of classical, soothing music. Everyone's kind of half-heartedly watching, a bit bored, somebody very politely clapping. Nobody's massively into it. And then he gets shoved out of the way, and Mariner comes on with Tendi to play some really hardcore rock music. Guitars, loud, so loud it reverberates through the whole ship. So loud, apparently, that it reverberates through space. Let's leave aside the technical abilities of sound to do that. And the Klingon ship that they're currently communicating with also feels it. And it's a nice comic scene, little snippet, leaving aside the fact that I'm pretty sure it wouldn't reverberate that much. But there's a nice little joke about the Klingons, how they, when the captain says, "Oh, it must be on your ship," that he then makes a joke about, says he's going to kill his engineer because of the malfunctioning equipment on their side. Nice little joke. And then we get the captain sending the head of security down to the bar to stop the music, and by that point the guitar music has stopped. Boimler is back on, so the security comes in and assumes it's him and just breaks his violin thing. It's a nice little scene, and I'm liking these little snippets of little humour at the beginning. It stretches the realms of possibility within the Star Trek universe, as I think I mentioned in the last two reviews, there always seems to be something that stretches it. And I don't mind this. In this sense, it's probably the reverberations, but I mind this less than I do when characters act in a very strange way. Like the last two episodes, we had, like I say, I can't remember what last week's was, but the first week was the characters continuing their date conversation and not helping out with firing against the zombies when that all went down on the ship. That was more of a character thing, so it bugged me a little bit more. Because it was just like, these characters feel like they should be engaging at that point with what's going on around them, and they're not. They're stopping for a joke. So that bugged me a little bit. Here, it doesn't bother me at all, because even though, it wouldn't reverberate through the whole ship, it's not about the characters, and it's the characters that are important to me here. There isn't so much of an A plot and a B plot this week, where in the last two episodes we've had very separate A plots and B plots, and they kind of intersect towards the end. Here, what's going on the ship and what's going on the planet are linked mostly from the start. It starts off as a little bit of an A and B plot because you've got the time management thing, and I thought it was a really interesting thing to explore, and I like the fact that this buffer time idea that they build in excess time. When a officer asks how long will this take, they say longer than they know it will, so that they A, get it done quicker and look like heroes, and B, get to build in buffer time, which means that they get to have margaritas or just relax and not be worked off their feet 24/7. And it's I think it was in a way it's a commentary on micromanaging, because when the captain finds out about this and implements, time edicts for every little job that needs to be done, the ship falls apart because everyone is so stressed, everyone is so frantic, trying to get everything done in the time that now they don't have enough time to do it in, and nobody's having fun. Things get sloppy, things get mistaken, which leads into the main plot of the show, the episode Down on the Planet. And I think it's just a good sort of commentary on micromanaging and productivity, and how trying to get more done in a limited amount of space isn't the best way necessarily to increase your productivity. Sometimes building in that relaxation time, that buffer time, is important. And I think that's a very good message. Talking of messages, also trusting your crew is another important thing. If you don't feel as an employee, as a worker on a starship, that you are trusted, you're going to be less likely to want to put in the effort. If they're not going to trust you, why should you care? Because they don't trust you. And I think that's another good thing. Put trust in your crew is another good message of this episode. So things are kind of going a bit sloppy all over the ship, but one of the things that happens because it's gone a bit sloppy is that when the away team go down for the diplomatic mission to give the gifts to this alien race down there, one of the crew members who was in charge of loading up the ship has loaded up the wrong thing, because they were so time pressured that they got a bit flustered or just picked up the wrong thing because they were on a time schedule and needed to get it done quickly, and didn't have time to check it properly, so they just got it onto the ship. And they open up this box expecting there to be a crystal in there, because this race is massively into crystals, and it's wood. And I love the expression and the comments from the alien race when they see this bit of wood. They're like, oh, it's wood. And it's just the horror on their faces that this is the gravest insult that could ever happen to them, is being offered wood. It was very well played. The alien race in this were hilarious in their reactions to lots of stuff. The leader, and in fact all of the race were just very amusing from start to finish. Now, the two characters we focus on the away mission, Mariner is down there, and then the second in command is down there as well. I think his name is Jack, isn't it? I think. I'm not sure what his surname is. Or maybe his surname is Jack. I don't know. I think the captain referred to him as Jack at one point. So they're down there, and they don't get on. They clash quite a lot, because Mariner is an anti-authoritative person. She doesn't like, rules. She doesn't like protocol. She rolls up and he doesn't like that. She rolls up her sleeves, and he tells her that's against code and tells her to roll down her sleeves. And they're butting heads constantly throughout this episode. And that dynamic is really interesting to see just generally anyway, but how it develops through the episode is quite intriguing, and maybe has some possibilities for later on down the line as well. Jack is very funny. He's the kind of like Kirk / maybe slightly Riker in the early seasons of TNG type character. He's meant to be the active action hero type guy, and that leads to him jumping in to try and negotiate with them and go, no, I will jump in and use my charm too, and then it immediately gets whacked in the balls by some kind of club or something and electrocuted by an electric net. And then Mariner's like, hey, that was awesome. Seeing that, and just that whole butting heads dynamic is really fun throughout this episode, but it leads to some interesting places because they get captured, and then there is a fight to the death to decide whether or not they are guilty or not, trial by combat, and they are fighting. Mariner and the second in command are fighting over who should fight to the death, and the alien guy is there going, you do realize you're fighting over who should die, and they're like, yeah, I want to do it. Anyway, in the end, the second in command stabs Mariner in the foot in order to go out so that she can't go out there, and he goes out there. But what we learn from that is that he wasn't necessarily... I mean, there is the bravado that he has. That's his stereotypical. As I was saying earlier, even the secondary characters here, they have their stereotype, and they display that stereotype, but they do branch out from it, and we learn that they are deeper than their stereotype. And that keeps happening with all of the characters. And for the second in command, it's the fact that actually, yeah, he's got this bravado, and yeah, he likes to swagger in and save the day and stuff. But also, he wasn't going to let one of his crew, as the second in command, as the ranking officer there, he wasn't going to let another one of his crew put their life in danger when he feels he should be doing it because they're his crew. He wants to protect them. And that was really nice to see, because we're getting people have I think online I've seen criticism of the bridge crew and things, or the way the bridge crew are portrayed in the first episode particularly, that they were very condescending, looking down on the lower decks and things like that. And that is there, absolutely, especially when you've got characters like Jack and Mariner who butts heads. They are very much clashing in terms of personalities. But we also saw them in the second episode being really supportive of their lower decks crew. So we know already that it's not just black and white, that they're not all condescending. But here we get to see they really care about their crew. He in particular cares about his crew. He's not going to let her put herself in danger. He's going to take this on. So he goes out and fights the big, massive alien and does a really good job. This is the bit from the trailer where he rips his shirt open and he's all muscles and stuff, and he starts fighting. And it's absolutely hilarious because Mariner finds herself watching this fight and going... And finding herself finding this quite hot. And then immediately she's like, oh God, no, don't think like that. But then later on, while she's still watching it, and the captain is, although he's still fighting, he's trying to negotiate and say, look, I want a peaceful resolution to this, to the big monster that he's fighting. And we can do this diplomatically. And Mariner's watching there, and the delivery of the line is brilliant. I will not be able to do it justice, but she basically goes, oh, so ethical. And it's hilarious. I love it. It's absolutely brilliant. And so there's this, like, from that point on, we know there's this, like, oh, she kind of likes him a little bit. She kind of finds him attractive. They butt heads, but that's something that's there now. And whether or not that will develop throughout the rest of the series, and we'll see some more of that, I don't know. I hope we do, because it was interesting and it could go somewhere. And of course, at the end of the episode, we find out that he kind of finds her a little bit hot too, because he says so when she kicks off at him for still getting her arrested for not pulling up her, pulling down her sleeves earlier on in the episode. She gets thrown in the brig right at the end of the episode by him, despite the fact that she said she wasn't going to report him for stabbing her in the foot. She really kicks off and starts throwing stuff at him and gets dragged away by security, and then he goes, yeah, that was kind of hot. So there's a thing growing between those two, and I kind of want to see more of it. So while all that's going on down on the planet, we get Boimler, who is loving the new time directive. He's the only person on the ship that is thriving under this, because he loves protocol, he loves systems, he loves just being, regimented times, he wants more work, he's a workaholic, and he loves it. So everyone else is kind of like falling asleep at their posts, and he's like, yep, I'm still ahead of schedule. And then the ship gets boarded by these aliens who, as well as arresting them down on the planet, have now decided to attack the ship as well. And normally this ship wouldn't be any match for a Starfleet ship, but everyone is so tired and working at such a low productivity level because the captain was trying to increase productivity that they don't bring up the shields in time. They end up boarding, and ultimately it's Boimler who approaches the captain and says, I think what we need to do is relax the rules. And the captain puts out a shipwide thing saying, ignore all rules, just stop the invaders. No protocols, just stop them. And they do. And it was Boimler's idea that saves the day. He sort of maybe slightly regrets it later on, because he gets a rule named after him that factors in that people should be allowed buffer time, and he's like, no, I don't want that. I don't want to be remembered for that, because he's all about the productivity. But it's a nice moment that he gets to save the ship. He's not. Again, this is people breaking out of their stereotypes, because the stereotype of him is that he is a rule follower, doesn't like diverting off of the rules at all, strictly workaholic, wants to progress, do everything by the book type of guy. But here, he's the one suggesting that they deviate away from that in order to save the ship. And up until that point, the captain hasn't considered that the captain has been like, no, we need to be more productive so that we can save the ship. But that's not working. And it's Boimler the one that kind of branches out from his stereotype and saves the day. So I would say that's what this episode is all about, really. Breaking out from your stereotype that people may think of you as, and embracing other aspects that, might not be your first reaction, or maybe are a bit deeper down, not on the surface level, and expressing those. And also about, obviously, the fact that micromanaging and working workers to the ground is not a good way to increase productivity. That's a good message. Any employers watching, to take that message to heart. Buffer time is good time. So yeah, my favourite episode of the show so far. Only 3 episodes in, of course. What did you think of it? Did you enjoy this episode? Let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you thought of it. Anything that I haven't mentioned that you think was noteworthy, let me know. And of course, as always, I'll be back next week for more Star Trek reviews. I also do Doctor Who content throughout the week as well, so do subscribe if any of that is your bag. And I will see you next week for another Star Trek review. Thanks a lot. Bye.